Now we're going into attitudes and behavior with group. And so just some terms. Attitude is a learned tendency to evaluate people, issues, events, and objects in a certain way. So that's usually, I feel like, by thought. And then behavior is an organism's activities in responses to external or internal stimuli. So like when like an individual actually acts out on their thoughts or does like has an interaction between a person, like in this little cartoon, it's this guy getting angry at his probably employee. And so I think very common terms tested for attitudes and behaviors with groups, one of them is conformity. So conformity is a tendency for people to modify their behavior so that it is in line with group norms. And so there are two different types of influence that may affect the reasons for conformity. One is informative influence, which is when you're looking for guidance and assuming that the group is correct when you yourself don't really know what to do, possibly because you just don't have that much experience with a certain subject or topic. That's why you are looking to other people for that help. And then normative influence is when you are following the group's negative actions to prevent group rejection, even though you know it's not right. So in that case, you're just trying to fit in, even though you know that it's not necessarily the best thing to do. And then a common study associated with conformity that the MCAT likes to test on is the Ash line study. So it was done by Solomon Ash, where he showed a target line and gave 3 choices with different pictures of line lengths. And so he would give a picture to, well, what it would be like is in the room, they would have multiple participants that were actually like working with the study. And then they had that one like test subject, that experimental person there to see how the effects of the other members' answers would impact that experimental person's answer. So here we see solitary members made errors less than 1% of the time, which means that he showed this target line and gave, the choices to the participant, and the participant would correctly choose the line that was like the answer choice that had a similar length as the target line. But when they were put in a group, 75 participants gave the wrong answer at least once, and 33 conformed every single time with the group when they were surrounded with a group who gave the wrong answer for that target line, and they were that one person in the room that was the actual experimental person and had to decide, should I be going with what everyone else is saying or say the answer that I definitely believe is right. And so that I feel like that would be associated with a type of normative influence, because you already know that the answer is not right, but you're just kind of going with the group, because you may think that you may be rejected from the group if your answer is not in line with everyone else. So that's just a popular study. And then another popular idea is obedience, which is how we follow orders and obey authority. And so a popular study associated with this is the Milgram study. And the Milgram study, I gave a diagram on the right here. It was done to study the willingness of participants to follow authority figures that instructed them to perform behaviors that conflicted with their beliefs and morals. So here we see that E is supposed to be, well, hold on. So the participants were told that this was a study looking at punishment and memory/learning, and then that there was a teacher and a learner, and the teacher was instructed to teach the learner a number of words. So the teacher here was the person that was being tested on. So that was the experimental person. And then the learner is another, so both the experimenter and the learner are both related to the study itself. So the teacher, so the subject, was instructed to shock the learner in increasing voltage each time the learner gave the wrong answer. And so it would get to a certain point where they kind of had like a, I believe it was like a covered screen. So the experimental subject didn't actually see like the learner across the way, but rather they heard their responses and screams, or like recordings of screams to the voltages that the teacher was supposed to be giving every time they gave the wrong answer. But basically from the results, 65% shocked all the way to the 450 voltage by the experimenter's instruction, because the experimenter was the one that was telling them to increase this voltage. So as we can see, like the experimental subject here was listening to the experimenter, even though he or she knew that the learner was experiencing this excruciating amount of pain, just because of how I guess our tendency is to obey authority. And so it's kind of shocking. It's a little scary, but yes, just be aware. And then here's another study that looks at both conformity and obedience, which is the Zimbardo Prison study, or the Stanford Prison experiment. And that's looking to see how conformity or obedience can result in acts different from usual or even contrary to how they would think or act. So just some preface about this study. Actually, all the students knew every single detail about the study, and they willingly participated and were randomly assigned as guards or prisoners. So this is a little different from the Milgram experiment, where they kind of didn't exactly tell the subjects everything about the study. And then in addition, guards could not physically harm prisoners, but could create fear, loss of privacy, loss of control, and loss of individuality for the patients, for the not patients, but the prisoners. But the study actually had to be stopped early, because by day 2, prisoners were starting to have mental breakdowns, and about half of them had mental breakdowns by day 6, which is a little, it's crazy, right? Because the students were all on, in a way, the same playing field before going to the study, and then they were suddenly assigned as guards or prisoners just as a part of the study protocols. So just being moved into this other environment has really just like influenced their mode of thinking, to conform to, you know, the practices of the prison, and then also be obedient to all of the guards who are probably just their other classmates that were there in the study. So this experiment really shows us that the influence situation can have on our behavior, and the role of internalization